Hi there. Welcome. My name is Briha Sarathi, and I'm here on behalf of Pariyatti as its executive director. We're grateful that you've all joined us today. For those of you who are not already familiar with Pariyatti, we're a nonprofit charitable organization based in the USA. Our mission is to enrich the world by disseminating the words of the Buddha, providing sustenance for the seeker's journey, and illuminating the meditator's path. Pariyatti imports books from around the world, reprints books, publishes new titles, and converts existing material into digital formats. We protect and provide an enormous catalog of Dhamma resources in many languages and formats that otherwise would not be as easily available. We offer many free services, such as the Pariyatti Learning Center, the Treasures of Pariyatti, and daily words for inspiration via email, RSS feed, and our mobile app. We offer most audio and video material, as well as many ebooks and audiobooks free of charge, including a large number of resources for students of SN Goenka. We also organize donation-based residential Pali workshops and facilitate pilgrimages for Vipassana meditators. For more information about Pariyatti, please visit our website at pariyatti.org. So for today's event, we are joined by Venerable Bhikkhu Anālayo to discuss his book, Daughters of the Buddha, Teachings by Ancient Indian Women. Venerable Bhikkhu Anālayo was ordained in Sri Lanka, where he completed his PhD in Buddhist studies. His thesis was published as Satipatthana, the Direct Path to Realization. With over 400 academic publications, Venerable Analayo is a leading scholar in research on early Buddhism, with a special interest in the topics of the position of women in Buddhism and Buddhist meditation. Recently retired from his position as a university professor in Germany, he is now a resident scholar at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies in Massachusetts, USA, and he spends most of his time in meditation. Today, Venerable Bhikkhu Anālayo will be interviewed by Marta van Patten. Marta is a documentary filmmaker and a Vipassana teacher in the tradition of SN Goenka. During this interview, please submit your questions via the chat option in Zoom and send them to a user named Send Questions Here. So without further ado, I give you Venerable Bhikkhu Anālayo and Marta van Patten.
Morning, Bhante.
Marta, here we are.
Yeah, nice to see you. How is your cough?
We will see how it goes.
Okay. Yeah, so welcome and thank you so much for taking the time for doing this interview. It's such a beautiful book and it's so inspiring. Let me just show the audience the book. Due to you having a cough, I guess you won't be able to read from this, so I'll be reading some passages for people. And then we'll discuss certain parts. So I wanted to also just mention, I wanted to dedicate this interview to all the inspiring Indian women meditation teachers and friends I've been very fortunate to meet over the years, because I'm obviously not Indian, and this book is about Indian women, so it's really inspiring. I personally had never heard a lot of the stories in this book, so I found it interesting that a lot of these stories are unheard. Maybe other people have heard them, but I personally, even the first story about the death of the first nun, which we'll of course get to, was amazing to me. Yeah, so why don't we just dive in here. Let's start with the foreword. Okay, so this foreword is written by Bhikkhuni Dhammananda. Bhikkhu Anālayo's monumental book not only provides new material for the tiny pockets of Theravada bhikkhunis that are spreading in various countries, but also further emphasizes the necessity to explore other traditions and not limit ourselves to the Pali tradition. This work also connects and strengthens the Theravada bhikkhunis and the Mahayana bhikkhunis to support each other. As a Buddhist academic who became a bhikkhuni, I knew that the support of our brother bhikkhus is essential. Bhikkhu Anālayo has done his responsibility as a bhikkhu, as intended by the Buddha, well. My great appreciation is not just that he is supporting the bhikkhuni cause, but that he has taken the duty given to him by the Buddha seriously, to study the teaching and to put it into practice. After the Buddha, it is the bhikkhus who have the duty to care of the bhikkhunis. Authority to give ordination to bhikkhunis depends on the bhikkhu sangha. The rise and fall of Buddhism also depends on the harmonious work of the fourfold Buddhist communities. This book stands as a symbol of this true spirit of a bhikkhu. This book is represents maybe to many people kind of a reestablishment of the fourfold support of the sasana, that it's not that the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, as well as the lay practitioners, would all be strengthened in order to support this rearising of the Dhamma. I'm sure there's many other books as well, but this one for women is particularly unique to read these stories and to have them kind of unearthed for us to enjoy.
Well, it is not directly about what Bhikkhuni Dhammananda is talking about there. I think is more about my work on establishing the legality of Bhikkhuni ordination. And so this book, you're right, this book is part of that overall project, but it doesn't really address the legal problems, but much rather it brings out that from the outset of the tradition, women ordained and lay have made a major contribution in all kind of different ways. And so that gives us a vision of seeing the potential, if we actually reestablish the four assemblies, of how vibrant and powerful the tradition could be if women are given the place they deserve.
And I know it's a longer story, but would you be able to mention this reestablishing of the ordination of bhikkhunis in the Theravadan lineage? I know it's a huge, topic, but maybe briefly you could mention your work with that.
Yeah, the basic problem is that at some point, and we don't know exactly when, the lineage of bhikkhunis ordination died out. And it's a basic principle of monastic law that, like, if I want to become a monk, there has to be other monks who make me monk, who give me ordination, and this has to be a living tradition going all the way back, at least in theory, to the Buddha. And so once that lineage gets interrupted, it's a question whether you can reestablish it or not. And basically, there have been, I think many monks would actually have liked to do that already in the past, but they were under the impression that it's not possible. And then there's a kind of like a way of getting around, because I think it's the 5th century, I don't remember the dates exactly, some Sri Lankan nuns traveled to China. In China at that time, only the male monastic ordination lineages had arrived. So they went there and to pass on the ordination lineage to nuns in China. And so there has been the question of whether, since this has continued, we still have Chinese bhikkhunis today, why not just simply take it from them? But the problem with that kind of solution is that, ordination is a ritual act that is only considered valid if it conforms to certain parameters within a particular Vinaya tradition. And in China, the Theravada Vinaya has not continued. In fact, they have adopted a different Vinaya, the Dhammaguptaka Vinaya. They also, you can see visually, they wear very different clothes. And all kind of legal problems are there about, like, how do you exactly determine the place where ordination is to be held, and so on. So this taking ordination from the Chinese Dhammaguptaka lineage is not really an option that is legally acceptable to traditionalists in the Theravada tradition. And that has nothing to do with men or women. They would also not accept it if it would be a male. If I take ordination in the Dhammaguptaka tradition, then Theravada monks would say, it's very nice to meet you, but we are not going to observe recital of the rules with you together because you belong to a different lineage. And this has sometimes not been fully appreciated by Westerners who don't fully understand the complexity of these Vinaya traditions and how they operate. And I have found a way of getting around that, because a very close reading of the relevant passages from the Theravada Vinaya show that in a situation where there is no bhikkhuni order in existence, the bhikkhus can give the ordination. And I've written a lot about that. I've also had to debate it with some who disagree, and I've written a book about that. And I think by now I can say that I have been able to defend the legality of that option. The option that if there are no living bhikkhunis who can give ordination, it can be started again by having it performed by the bhikkhus. And that makes it a totally Theravada kind of thing, and it doesn't create the problems this other option would create. And now it is just a question of time until this option will be generally recognized. In Sri Lanka, we have quite a lot of bhikkhunis. In Thailand, somewhat less, and Bhikkhuni Dhammananda is very well known among those in Thailand. In Burma, not at all. That's the current situation. And a somewhat similar situation holds also for the Tibetans, the Mula Sarvastivada tradition. And together with the Tibetan nun, we have also found a similar option where it can be done just within the Mula Sarvastivada by the bhikshus. And for some time there was a hope that maybe, first we thought maybe the Dalai Lama is going to make something, then the Karmapa, but he's no longer able to do these things. So what we have, and that happened just very recently in Bhutan, it has been started. The Queen of Bhutan said, hey, just do it, and they did it. So at present we have bhikkhunis Theravada and we have bhikshunis in the Mula Sarvastivada tradition. So they still have to grow and have to develop, but at present, in all of the three Vinaya lineages that we have, Theravada, Dharma, Guptaka, and Mula Sarvastivada, in all three, we have now all four assemblies.
Okay, wow.
Was that somehow possible to follow that? I try to make complex things simple.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you. It's inspiring. So I thought we could dive into the book with the first nun, since you start the book with the first nun, Mahapajapati. Okay, so as you write, she was the Buddha's maternal aunt who nursed him after the death of his mother and who took a central role in the events leading to the founding of the Bhikkhuni Sangha. So I'm reading from page 4. At that time, Mahapajapati Gautami approached the Buddha, paid homage with her head at the Buddha's feet, stood back to one side and said, Blessed One, can women attain the fourth fruit of recluseship? For that reason, can women leave the home out of faith and become homeless to train in the path in this right teaching and discipline? The Blessed One replied, Wait, Gautami, do not have this thought, that women leave the home out of faith and become homeless to train in the path in this right teaching and discipline. Gautami, you shave off your hair like this, put on monastic robes, and for your whole life, practice the holy life in purity. Then there's a second version that's slightly different, which I'm not going to read to save a little time. In the Pali counterpart, Mahapajapati Gautami does not refer to the spiritual potential of women and only petitions for permission to be granted for women to go forth. In this account, it is instead the Buddha's attendant Ananda who, intervening later on behalf of Mahapajapati Gautami and her followers, brings up the topic of women's ability to awaken, which the Buddha confirms in the following words. Having gone forth from home to homelessness, in the teaching and discipline made known by the Tathagata, women are capable of realizing the fruit of stream entry, the fruit of once return, the fruit of non-return, and the fruit of arahantship. The important indication given in the above passage reflects the inclusiveness underpinning the Buddha's teaching activities, whose main scope was precisely to enable others to reach these four fruits of recluseship. Bhikkhuni Dhammananda in 2010 comments that it was because of this equal spiritual ability that the Buddha allowed women to join the Sangha, and the statement should be an encouragement for Buddhist women everywhere. Yes, this last part. In the ancient Indians, there's one more paragraph. In the ancient Indian setting, a monastic lifestyle was generally considered the most appropriate avenue for progress to awakening. In addition, from the perspective of early Buddhist thought, it seems as if someone who attains the highest of these four and becomes an arahant will be unable to continue to live the lay life and would therefore soon go forth if that had not already happened. This point relates to a minor difference between the two versions translated above. As in the first Chinese version, Mahapajapati Gotami inquires whether women can reach the fourth fruit of recluseship, whereas in the second, her query is about all four fruits. Needless to say, if they can reach the fourth fruit, the other three are implicitly covered. But by highlighting the fourth fruit in particular, her inquiry could be read to convey, at the same time, the implicit question: what does the Buddha expect to happen if a lay woman successfully implements his teachings and becomes an arahant, thereby becoming unable to continue living as a lay person? Should there not be some provision for such a case? It's wonderful because, of course, I had only heard the Pali version. I had not heard this other version. So it makes perfect sense that she would phrase it that way. I wondered if you could speak a little bit about why an arahant cannot remain a householder. It's obvious perhaps to most, but perhaps you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, the reasoning for that is not so explicit. It's just that an arahant is so free from any kind of sensual desire and attachment that they cannot partake karma paribunji, sanidikaram karma paribunji, cannot partake of what is sensual, having stored it up. Yeah. I think the idea is that if the idea is you normally, I mean, the normal way to walk the path in early Buddhism was to ordain. And if you have not ordained, all the accomplished lay persons we get in the suttas, women and men, are non-returners who have mastery of absorptions and living anyway a celibate life. But even that kind of cooking for oneself and having to do these things, it seems that an arahant just can't be bothered and finds it most conducive to just live by begging in this complete independent lifestyle. It's not really fully spelled out why this is, but it's a very widespread belief. It's made explicit in the commentaries. And I mean, to me, intuitively, it makes sense because, I mean, I'm not an arahant, but I can't imagine living a lay life. I mean, that's just, forgive me for saying that. It's just, wow, no way, you know. I mean, it's just this is just so suitable for walking the path. And in fact, the important Burmese monk who wrote about the legality of bhikkhu ordination already quite some time ago, he was precisely apparently motivated because at that time the Vipassana tradition, and I'm saying Vipassana in general, not just Vipassana by S.N. Goenkaji, as it was starting, and he was having these female practitioners who were moving ahead, and there was this firm belief that if they become arahants, since they cannot ordain, they have to die within 7 days. And so he was really inspired or motivated by that to clarify that actually it's possible to ordain them. It's possible to give them full bhikkhuni ordination. That was a central motivating factor for him.
So the same thing came up again, actually. The same concept that that there needs to be some provision for that.
Yeah, but I mean, from my perspective, what motivates me is not so much what's going to happen to the women arahants, but more like what's going to happen to all those women who are not yet arahants, but who want to walk that path. Because for me, I mean, in my own experience, I got so much support and possibilities, and if I had been a woman, I would not have gotten those. I wouldn't be at the place where I am right now. And that is, I find that unacceptable. Because it's not about some, it just makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think that is for me more the point. And with these parallel versions, we have to a little bit see that this is just, this is just oral transmission of that works in different ways. And there is a tendency sometimes for something to get lost in one lineage, but then it can still be preserved in another one. And this is really the point that I'm making with these comparative studies. It's just this traditional Theravada belief that Pali Canon, the Buddha's word, we got it exactly. No, not quite. It's an oral transmission over centuries, what maybe by the time of King Ashoka, people believed the Buddha said. We can't get much further than that. But we have different reports of these beliefs, and we can compare them. And that is the point I'm making in this chapter on Mahapajapati Gautami's going forth, that what in principle we would expect to be a story of success, in some versions, and unfortunately also in the Pali version, actually looks quite different. And it really gives the impression that the Buddha did not want to give her ordination. He did not want to have bhikkhunis. And this is a very, very heavy thing, particularly if you are a bhikkhuni, and in whatever tradition, and you have this feeling, actually, the Buddha didn't really wanted us. We just kind of forced him to accept us. And that is the main message that comes out of this comparative study. It's one of my books, Foundation History of the Nuns Order, it's called, where I'm translating all the different versions, putting them side by side, and then checking which one is like coherent and not so coherent. That the story of the beginning of the Bhikkhuni order, Bhikshuni order, was a story of success, not a story of failure. The Buddha wanted nuns. It's not that he had to be pushed and manipulated to allow them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice to see that clarified. Okay, I wanted to move to another story here. It's on page 17, in case anyone has the book. I'm going to just read this section. Then Mahapajapati heard the monks saying, "The Tathagata will soon enter complete extinction within 3 months and between the twin sal trees in Kusinara." Then Mahapajapati in turn thought, "I cannot stand seeing the Tathagata enter complete extinction, and I also cannot stand seeing Ananda enter complete extinction. It is proper that I should now enter complete extinction first." Then Mahapajapati in turn approached the Blessed One, paid respect with her head at his feet, and sat to one side. Then she said in front of the Buddha, "I heard that the Blessed One will soon enter complete extinction within 3 months from now, between the 10 twin sal trees in Kusinara. Now I cannot stand seeing the Blessed One and Ananda enter complete extinction. I only wish that the Blessed One would permit me to enter complete extinction first." Then the Blessed One approved it by remaining silent. So I wondered if you could just talk about this idea of not wanting to witness the Buddha's passing away as being read as a polite way of expressing one's own wish to precede him, like rather than an indication that she's overwhelmed by grief. Can you talk about the concept there?
Yeah, Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, who is also here in the among the participants, she's written on that, so she would actually be a better person than me to speak about it. But yeah,
okay, great.
It's not about grief, because an Arahant does not have grief.
Yes.
Arahants are completely free from grief, so it's not at all about grief, and it's just a little bit peculiar kind of way of expressing things.
So then Mahapajapati further said to the Buddha, "From now on, I only wish the Blessed One would grant that the nuns recite the rules without me." The Buddha said, "I now permit that the nuns in turn grant other nuns the reciting of the precepts, just as I originally promulgated the precepts without causing any deviation. Then Mahapajapati went forward to pay respect at the Buddha's feet and stood in front of the Buddha. Then she said to the Buddha, "Now I will no longer see the Tathagata's face, and I will also not see future Buddhas. I will not take birth in a womb and forever abide in the unconditioned. Today I depart and will never again see the Noble One's complexion." Then she circumambulated the Buddha 7 times, and she also circumambulated Ananda 7 times. She completed circumambulating the community of monks, withdrew, and left. Returning to be among the community of the nuns, she said to the nuns, "I now wish to enter the unconditioned element of nirvana. The reason is that the Tathagata will soon enter complete extinction. You should each act according to what is suitable at this time." Then the 500 nuns, with the nun Kema at their head, said to the Buddha, "We all heard that the Tathagata will soon enter complete extinction. We cannot stand seeing the Blessed One and Ananda enter complete extinction first. We only wish that the Blessed One would permit us to enter complete extinction first. We would now enter nirvana, this being proper and suitable." Then the Blessed One approved it by remaining silent. So the circumstance that, one more paragraph, is the circumstance that her following a nun adopts the same decision of entering Nibbana shows that taking this decision was not motivated by the impending loss of close relatives, as the nuns mentioned by name in the above passage were not necessarily relatives of the Buddha and Ananda. In fact, the present episode has no relationship to the Indian custom of married women reacting to the death of her husband, or on rare occasion, to the death of other male family members by committing suicide. Due to having gone forth as nuns, Mahapajapati Gautami and her followers had already stepped out of the traditional framework of male guardianship by close family members and no longer needed to avoid the role of the surplus woman without male guardianship. But I wondered if you could just maybe elaborate a little bit on this concept of what at that time it was like, this concept of surplus woman. I mean, in Western standards, people wouldn't understand this very well, but in Indian society, there was such a strong protection for women by the father or the husband. And this is completely different from that, of course.
No, I think I'm responding here to somebody who has interpreted it that way. Let me just check the footnote. Yeah, Wilson. This Wilson, she had this idea. So she says, Gautami frets about the death of male kinsmen because she may end up as a socially stigmatized woman if she does not relinquish her life before the death of her close kinsmen. So that's just the wrong interpretation.
Right.
And this is in part what the book is also meant to be. It's a kind of tendency, very widespread among, and perhaps even natural among scholars with the Western background, of reading our present ideas and values or something from the general ancient Indian background into the particular narratives or stories without really looking at the finer details. And so the idea, the famous widow burning sati, just like mindfulness, the same word is used for that. Is this idea in India that the main role of a woman is to become a wife and ideally to bear a son. And if the husband dies, then she has so much lost meaning that she might even just join him on the burning pyre and commit suicide. This is quite a lot of books I'm quoting there in my footnote. It is a misinterpretation of reading Gautami's story from that perspective. As you said in the part that you read out, it just doesn't work. First of all, these nuns are not necessarily relatives, and they're nuns. That the whole question of the wife losing the husband is no longer relevant. So this whole passage, it's one of the more difficult passages. You're choosing all the difficult passages so far. I hope we get to some of the more easier part later. It's a little difficult to make sense of from our Western perspective. I understand that. The most important part is it's not It's not about widow committing suicide.
Now we'll get to the actual nature of how she passed on. So then, this is from page 20. Then Mahapajapati closed the door of the oration hall, hit the gong, put down her sitting cloth in an open place, and soared up into the empty sky. While sitting, lying down, standing, and walking in the empty sky, from her body, burning flames came out. From her lower body, smoke came out. From her upper body, fire came out. From her lower body, water came out. From her upper body, smoke came out. Her whole body released flames. Her whole body released smoke. From the left side of her upper body, water came out. From the right side of her upper body, fire came out. From the right side of her upper body, water came out. From the left side of her upper body, fire came out. From the front, fire came out. From the back, water came out. From the front, water came out. From the back, fire came out. From her whole body, fire came out. And from her whole body, water came out. Now, the same Pali versions report that the Buddha had explicitly asked her to perform supernormal feats to dispel the doubts of the foolish regarding the ability of women to gain realization in his teaching. In this way, her performance of miracles is enhanced by being done in compliance with a personal invitation by the Buddha, combined with an explicit reference to the need to counter the foolish belief that women are not as capable as men in matters of meditative realization. This reference explains the purpose of such a public manifestation of supernormal abilities, which, due to being done on the verge of passing away, could not give rise to the mistaken impression of being tainted by the wish to motivate an increase of offerings to the performant. Yeah, so I wanted to read that because, of course, it's so fantastical. This is the twin miracle, and many of us have read about the Buddha performing this, I think, once or twice in his lifetime. And then it gets to even more as the rest of the nuns do the same. But I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about why you think that you mentioned it here, why the Buddha would have encouraged her, but that because we all know that he would discourage some of his monks from doing this, to be careful. And this is a case where he didn't discourage it. Is it mainly because of this concept that may have been prevalent and maybe is still prevalent that women wouldn't have been as capable? Or why would he have encouraged this?
That encouragement is found in the Pali version, in the Apadana, and there she doesn't actually do the full twin miracle.
Okay.
Because the Theravada tradition holds the position that a twin miracle can only be performed by the Buddha and nobody else. So we have to see this performance of miracles also as something that evolves over time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't read this as a historical account of what actually happened, to be yeah. I think it starts off, there's a general theme in ancient India of the superiority of the mind over matter. And I think as meditators, we can all subscribe to that there's we get sick and the mind is able to handle it and not get overwhelmed. And this basic idea then finds illustration in various narratives that over time become more and more miraculous. The narrative that is still within the framework of early Buddhism in general is the narrative of the Buddha's own passing away, where he, on the verge of death, he went through the four absorptions, the four immaterial spheres, cessation, attainment, down again. And this is manifestation of superb meditative mastery. On the verge of passing away, he was able to do the whole range of meditative attainments. But as the story there goes, Ananda didn't get it. He actually thought the Buddha had already passed away when the Buddha had just entered cessation. And only Anuruddha, who had the mental powers, was able to actually see what the Buddha was saying. No, he didn't die. He's just gone for cessation. So this is something that only adepts can really follow. And it's natural that over time, there come to be more visual things like this twin miracle. if you start manifesting fire and water, everybody can see that. Even Analayo would know what's going on. So there's a kind of literalism, and I've actually studied that. It starts with a discourse in the Udana, apparently a misunderstanding of a verse being taken literal, and then we get this monk Dabba who moves up into the air and then burns himself. And this has set a pattern for a lot of stories of self-cremation, self-combustion, however you call that. And this is also in the background of this account here. But fact stands that even shorn of its more fantastic details, if we may call it like that, the basic point is that she manifests supreme meditative mastery. And that because she does it on the verge of passing away, there cannot be this suspect of having done it in order to have some material benefits. And that is usually why monks and nuns are supposed not to manifest these, or even just to talk about like their attainments. Like if I start talking, I got this attainment, that attainment, and then people think, oh, let's give him some donation. I mean, this kind of thing. If that happens just before death, then this problem is not there.
Now we'll move on to her meditative mastery, basically. So this is page 21. When Mahapajapati had performed many transformations, she returned to her original seat to sit down cross-legged with straight body and straight mind, collecting mindfulness in front. She entered the first absorption. Rising from the first absorption, she entered the second absorption. Rising from the second absorption, she entered the third absorption. Rising from the third absorption, she entered the fourth absorption. Rising from the fourth, she entered the sphere of infinite space. Rising from the sphere of infinite space, she entered the sphere of infinite consciousness. Rising from the sphere of infinite consciousness, she entered the sphere of nothingness. Rising from the sphere of nothingness, she entered the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Rising from the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, she entered the cessation of perception and knowing. Rising from the cessation of perception and knowing, she returned to enter the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Rising from the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, she returned to enter the sphere of nothingness. Rising from the sphere of nothingness, she returned to enter the sphere of infinite consciousness. Rising from the sphere of infinite consciousness, she returned to enter the sphere of infinite space. Rising from the sphere of infinite space, she returned to enter the fourth absorption. Rising from the fourth absorption, she returned to enter the third absorption, and all the way down, and then all the way back up to the fourth absorption, she in turn entered complete extinction. At that time, there was a great earthquake in the world. The east rose up and the west sank down. The west rose up and the east sank down. The four sides rose up and the center sank down, and on all four sides a cool breeze arose. Some celestials in the sky danced and made music. Some celestials of the sensual sphere were crying in grief, which was like timely rain that falls out from the sky in a month of the spring season. The sublime celestials scattered various lotus fragrances and various kinds of sandalwood powder on her body. Being able to execute this entire series in forward and backward order functions as a mark of exceptional meditative mastery in the early discourses. Having completed this tour, the final part of the meditative journey then involves proceeding from the first to the fourth absorption in order to use the latter as the most appropriate platform for entering nirvana or nibbana. So, yeah, I guess I personally had never heard this story, and then that the nuns then all followed is quite astounding. The miracle is impressive, but this is even more impressive and just so inspiring. So I guess I wondered if you could talk about this what she's describing here, being able to traverse all these states and then back down again, and also if you could talk about this fourth absorption being the most appropriate platform for entering nibbana, which people might be interested in.
It is the same as the Buddha did, what I said before on when he passed away. He also did exactly the same tour. One time all the way up, then down, and then up to the fourth absorption, and then leaving from that. And the fourth absorption is in terms of actual concentration, it is the highest level. Because the four immaterial spheres are not distinct in terms of deeper levels of concentration compared to 1, 2, 3, 4, but they just take different objects. They become more refined by different objects: boundless space, boundless consciousness, nothingness, neither perception or non-perception. And for those who have not only mastery of these meditative attainments, but who also are Aryans, noble ones, according to the Theravada tradition, they must be non-returners or arhants, then the possibility to attain cessation, the cessation of feeling and perceptions. So all of this is, this is what I said before, it's just a sign of complete mastery of the mind to be able to perform all of these on the verge of death. It shows very clearly that there's not a trace of fear. I mean, our answer anyway, beyond fear, but it demonstrates it very clearly that there's not the slightest way of agitation in entering final nirvana. And the fourth absorption should, according to the discourses, already be a state where the breathing stops. So it's a kind of a place where the bodily functions are already very much subdued and the rest really takes place in the mental realm, which makes it quite an appropriate place also to enter final nirvana, as this is a condition shared with a dead body. Dead body also no longer breathes. In fact, there's this discussion, what is the difference between a dead body and somebody who has attained cessation? And the similarity is that both no longer breathe. But the breathing stop already happens, according to the discourses, already with the fourth absorption.
So on page 23, we'll finish this with the rest of the nuns. At that time, the nun Kema, the nun Upalavana, the nun Kisagotami, the nun Sakula, the nun Sama, the nun Patachara, the nun Bada Kachana, the nun Vijaya, being at the head of 500 nuns, each put down their sitting cloths in an open place and soared up into the sky, while sitting, lying down, standing, and walking in the empty sky, performed 18 transformations, up to they entered into the cessation of perception and knowing, and each of them entered complete extinction. In other words, all of her 500 followers also performed the twin miracle and did a meditative tour in forward and backward order of the four absorptions and the four formless spheres up to sensation before entering Nibbana. So it's just an extraordinary story. I had never heard this story before. It's surprising, I guess, because it's not as well known. I guess, do you have a sense of why it's not so well known? I don't even remember hearing the story when we were on the Buddha pilgrimage, in this area in Vaishali. It's not something that's told. I guess, yeah. Do you have a sense of why it's not so well known?
I assume that the pilgrimage. I'm not sure, but I assume the pilgrimage would mainly have been based on Theravada texts. And the Pali counterpart is found in the Abhidhamma. And this is generally not taken so much, not read so much. There's a kind of tendency to approach Pali text mainly for what fits our Western kind of perspectives, what sometimes we call that Protestant Buddhism, selecting from the Pali discourses all that very profound philosophy, rational meditation practices, and leaving all the miracles and supernatural things aside. So there's a tendency of focusing on that would explain why these stories normally don't receive that much of attention. In fact, I'm really surprised that you spend so much time on this chapter.
Okay. Well, I mean, for those who find this all too fantastical, maybe you can just describe in some kind of scientific language this twin miracle and what it is.
Well, I think for those of us who are less inspired by these miraculous kind of things, and I would count myself among them, I've said that what I'm collecting is for different readers. Some like the miraculous stuff, some more like the rational stuff. For me, the most inspiring story in the whole book is Kajangala. She gives a very doctrinal exposition, and it's the only single instance I'm aware of where somebody gives an exposition that is better than the one given by the Buddha. This is just totally outstanding. So this is what really kind of inspires me. But some find these stories beautiful and find them inspiring, and for others who don't find them inspiring, the basic message. And that doesn't really depend on how much water here and fire there, but the message that within that ancient cultural framework, these women were able to prove their utmost worth. They were able to show that they were highly mature meditative adepts. And that is a good message.
Okay, so since you mentioned Kajangala, let's skip to her. So this is for people who have the book, page 133. I'm going to read the question. So there's a question posed to her. Reverend Lady, the Blessed One said in the Great Questions, a question about one, a brief statement of one, an analysis of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a question about 10, a brief statement of 10, an analysis of 10. Revered Lady, how should the meaning of this succinct statement by the Blessed One be viewed in detail? Yeah, so this question is there. And then if you skip to page 141, so she answers all of these, but there's one I wanted to read in particular. And I'm hoping you can also speak about why her particular choice of how to answer these questions was unique. But one of them that I really found beautiful was a key teaching calling for cultivation comes up under the number 7. Friends, a monastic will make an end of dukkha in this very life on fully and well cultivating the mind in 7 things, fully seeing their end and fully penetrating their meaning. What are those 7? The 7 factors of awakening. The cultivation of the 7 awakening factors is perhaps, now this is in the book, back to Bhikkhu Anālayo's interpretation. The cultivation of the 7 awakening factors is perhaps the most important early Buddhist teaching for maturing the mind in its progress toward making an end of dukkha. But before we get to that, I wonder if you can describe the scenario, who's asking her this, and how this is a little bit unique because of the way she manages to not have repetition in her answers.
Well, this seems to be something very much grounded in the oral setting, where we had these numbers as an easy way to facilitate memorization. But the same is also used by Chitta, a male householder, in a debate with the leader of the giants. And there it seems to be just a way of reducing the other to silence. It's just as if I were to ask you, Marta, what is 1, 2, 3, 4? And you will say, don't know. What are you talking about? So it's kind of, you have to find a way of relating this basic scheme in a meaningful way to progress to awakening. And so Kajangala, she's being asked by these lay people, hey, we heard there is this teaching, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What is it about? And she doesn't know. She hasn't heard it from anyone. So she doesn't just, she says it, I haven't heard anyone. But let me think, the way I would go about it would be like this. And then she gives her talk. Now, the preceding discourse in the same Pali discourse collection actually gives the original teaching by the Buddha. Kajangala didn't have the Anguttara Nikaya books. You could have just turned the page and read it out. And if we look at it closely, we see that there's a little bit of redundancy there. And the way Kajangala expounds it on her own wisdom, there's no redundancy. And it's all, even you could read the whole thing as a continuous path of practice. And so she comes out with this very beautiful exposition, which I summarize on page 145. I'm giving an overview of representation, which is, with all the deep respect I have for the Buddha, she does a better job. I mean, maybe the Buddha originally gave a better one and what came down in tradition, but the way actually his exposition of these 10 is preserved, I don't find it as compelling as the one that she gives. And I do not know of any other instance with all my readings of the Pali and the Chinese Agamas and whatnot, of any other instances where I would say like, hey, this is even better than the Buddha's. It's just so powerful. And it's so integrated and clear. And honestly, before writing this book, I hadn't even heard about her.
Mm.
She's there. It's been translated into English by Bhikkhu Bodhi. But somehow I hadn't heard about the other nuns, those that with Marta and so on. But about Kajangala, I had just completely missed it. It was just because because I did a research trying to collect all the stories I could find that I came across this one. And it's such a gem, huh? I mean, whoa.
Yeah.
So it strikes me on both grounds, on the grounds how what a good job she done, and on the grounds that why am I the first one to talk about that? I just don't understand. This is so amazing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in the book like that, I felt. There was another one, I can find it here. I guess it's time for questions now.
Yeah, but Marta, this one is in Pali, you see. The other stories are in Chinese, and I'm usually the first one to translate them.
Oh, I see.
Mahapajapati's great passing away from the Mula Savastivada tradition. Of course, you have known about that because that's not in Pali and has not been as widely translated. But this one, Kajangala, I mean, she was there.
I see.
It's there in the Anguttara collection, and you just open the book and you'll find it.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can read that you just mentioned this on page 145. This just is a summary before we go to questions that describes how she answered this question. The balanced listing of items relevant to awakening, free of redundancy, that results from Kajangala expounding the matter in her own individual way, can be summarized in the following manner. 1, dispassion toward nutriment. 2, dispassion toward name and form. 3, dispassion toward the 3 feeling tones. 4, cultivation of the 4 establishments of mindfulness. 5, cultivation of the 5 faculties. 6, cultivation of the 6 elements of release. 7, cultivation of the 7 awakening factors. 8, cultivation of the members of the Noble Eightfold Path. 9, dispassion toward the 9 abodes of being. 10, cultivation of the 10 wholesome pathways of action. I had to look up a few. Maybe for the audience, you can just briefly tell them a few of them. The cultivation of the 5 faculties, people will know that one.
Yeah, I've discussed it in the book, and you can just see that this all flows along in one piece. And it's really like a map of the essentials of the Dhamma and the Path. It all comes together very nicely.
Okay, so we'll move on to questions so people have enough time to ask them. So, Bhante, thank you for your contributions. I was inspired by the counterpart idea. For example, Venerable Khema and Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Upalavana and Venerable Mahamoggallana. Could you please say something about this?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, there seems to be an idea central to the notion of a Buddha in the way we get it in early Buddhism, that they have like chief disciples, monastic, and also lay, actually. And so there's this pair, one strong in wisdom and one strong in the samadhi powers, if we call it like that. And so we have this, Sariputta is the chief of wisdom, and Mahamoggallana is very powerful with his powers. And we get the same with Khema. She's very, very wise, gives very profound teachings. And Upalavana has this superpower, supernormal abilities. And there is also the idea that Upalavanna and Mahamoggallana were of darker skin color, and Sariputta and Khema of brighter skin color. So there's also this kind of color integration there.
Yeah, at some point in the book, you talk about this as being incredibly inclusive. So people of different, that people would be inspired, that they would see people in these positions who looked like them. And I thought this was really beautiful too. I didn't know that before as well. Okay, another question. I heard that the Buddha initially refused the bhikkhuni ordination. The reason given was if the bhikkhuni ordination was not permitted, the sasana would have lasted 1,000 years, and now the consent, it would only last 500 years. With the consent, it would only last 500 years. Is this true? If so, what is the reason for this? So what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, is this true? Is an interesting question, because we are 2,500 years after that. So basically, it hasn't stopped after 500 years, 1,000 years, no? And I just recommend reading my book, The Foundation History of the Nuns Order. It's available as a PDF, and I'm discussing all these misogynist aspects that crept into some of the accounts there in detail. But I'm pretty sure that this is not the Buddha word.
Could you please introduce your research on the 8 Garudhammas, 8 rules of respect, and how do we understand and implement these rules in the context of gender equality in modern society?
Well, the 8 Garudhammas, I've also discussed that in my book. I would also recommend to read that part. How do we implement that in our modern society? And that is a question that I think those who want to go the monastic path have to answer individually. To some extent, I also have that. I have to negotiate between the rules that I have to follow in order to be allowed to wear robes and the present modern setting. And so the Garudhammas can be held in quite different ways. And that really depends on how we negotiate the situation. But if we make complete, absolute equality our prior value, then I think it would be better not to ordain.
Hey, Bhante, could you please say something about Venerable Sona and her abilities to overcome michadittis propounded by other teachers of the day?
Well, I'm not sure what I should say about her, as I wrote about her in the book. And
is this the teacher the where she flew up to talk to the yeah, it was one of my questions. We didn't get to it, but
so what was your question about it?
I asked I asked how do we not develop conceit when reading these stories? That we should be careful not to think so highly of ourselves, but just because some of the stories are so amazing. But I also commented on the fearlessness of her, and that it was just refreshing to see all these things collected in one place, of this type of just fearless, ability to just go forth and say what needs to be said.
Yeah, exactly. That is also what I get from that episode. And I think because discrimination against women is systemic in all Buddhist traditions, I wouldn't worry less about getting too conceited after reading it. I think you're entitled to a little bit of that, just to counterbalance the prevalent situation.
Why don't we just read that section? So I'm going to read that for people so they can know what we're talking about here. Page 152. Then the nun Sona heard this being said. The 6 teachers have come together in one place and have given rise to this discussion. We will be fully victorious over the recluse Gautama, who does not accept our teachings to the people. Then the nun Sona flew up into the sky and approached the 6 teachers, speaking this poem. My teacher has no equal. He is the most venerable one, whom none excels. I am that venerable one's disciple, called the nun Sona. Establish your positions, and in turn debate them with me. I shall reply to all matters, like a lion trapping a deer. Except for my venerable teacher, there is currently no Tathagata. I am a nun who right now can subdue outside practitioners completely. When the nun had said this, the 6 teachers were not even able to look at her face, let alone debate with her. Sona's feat, now this is back to the book, Sona's feat of levitation can be viewed in light of the similar feat attributed to Mahapajapati Gautami and her following of 500 nuns, taken up in the first chapter. The above feat differs as it does not involve the performance of the twin miracle and instead leads on to a challenge to debate doctrinal points. Both reflect an evolved notion of levitation prevalent in later texts, as the feat is performed with the physical body rather than involving just a mental body. The image of a lion trapping deer conveys Sona's self-confidence in challenging the 6 teachers. The term Tathagata, as briefly mentioned earlier, can at times simply refer to fully awakened ones in general, or else stand for the Buddha as the one who discovered the path to awakening on his own. The second sense seems to be the one relevant here, when Sona proclaims that only the Buddha is indeed such a Tathagata, and then follows this up with a challenge to a debate, confident that she is well able to subdue even all 6 teachers together. It also mentions the substantially higher position in the view of the traditional custom of expressing hierarchy through higher and lower seating. Sona's act of levitation has placed her at a level substantially higher than the 6 teachers. It follows that these would now have to levitate as well in order not to have to look up at her when making an argument. Presumably unable to perform such a feat and thereby unable even to start debating, the 6 teachers are publicly humiliated by a female disciple of the teacher whom they had wanted to best. With all due recognition to the underlying thrust of showcasing the superiority of the Buddha, from the perspective of the cultural setting, the resultant scene is remarkable, as here a single woman is shown to be victorious over a group of male teachers. The story continues by depicting the repercussions of this feat on the local populace, which turn out to be the exact opposite of what the 6 teachers reportedly had hoped for. So, yeah, it's quite an amazing story.
Yeah, very entertaining. No?
Yeah.
And in the ancient setting, debate was a very important thing. It's really in debate where you establish your own teaching, and if, for example, you and I debate, and you are reducing me to silence, it means I can't reply, then I actually have to become your disciple. And so debate is, and the strategy is also, it's not so much about who is right or wrong, but to use rhetoric in such a way that the other cannot reply. You can see that also in the Milinda Panya and other descriptions of debate, to say something to which the other has no way to reply. And so this image of, as a woman, and she goes up in the air, and they would have to look up to her in order to even start waiting, which is kind of like not really not very comfortable position. And yes, it's a very, I mean, if we keep in mind the ancient Indian background and the rules of debate and the importance of debate as public occasions for winning support and followers, it's a very, very powerful image. She flies up there. Hey, come on, start debating. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And they're like, these are the 6 teachers. So they appear also in the second discourse in the Digha Nikaya, the Samanya Pala Sutta, as like contemporaries of the Buddhas who were very famous and had a lot of following. And King at that time, Ajatasattu, he had first gone to all of these to see what teachings they have until he finally came to see the Buddha. So in the ancient setting, they are like competitors for support and respect, and the Buddha doesn't even have to handle them alone. She just does it for him.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see if there's another question here. Bhante, do you plan to write on Venerable Ambapali, who was one of the earliest female disciples of the Buddha?
Well, I would have included her if there would have been more material, but I didn't find much material.
Yeah, so someone asking about which of the lay disciples do you find the most inspiring and why? I also had them on my list to ask you about, but we're sort of running out of time.
Nanda Marta, very clearly.
Say it again.
The Marta.
Okay.
I mean, she is just way beyond. And the setting again, it's a little bit like the Sona story, you know. I mean, here she is, and Sariputta and a group of monks come, and she already knows they're coming. She has the food all prepared, and she offers them all the food. And so the monks are all like, whoa, that was very timely. And then he is asking her about her qualities. So she's just being the devoted. I mean, I don't know if in ancient they were as much as what I'm used to from Sri Lanka, but in Sri Lanka, the lay people are so wonderfully respectful and kind when they offer food to monks. And this is really very touching to experience that. And so you just imagine that, and then this Daika Mahatmya, this lay woman is offering food, and suddenly she starts to display all of her qualities. And what strikes me most is that her only son, and in ancient India, for a woman to have a son was something very, very important. Her only son is being arrested for false suspicion, sentenced to death, and killed. And in all these three occasions, she just remains equanimous. This is just, woof, man. In fact, I assume, and when Sariputta kept asking questions, I assume the other monks, they were all like, wait a moment. This woman just gave us food. Achieves, of course, she's a non-return, has all the meditative attainments. But the thing with her son, that really strikes me most strongly. I mean, imagine you have just one son, you have given birth to him, you've carried him here and brought him up, and he's just being arrested by the king for wrong reason, for wrong suspicion. And then he's being sentenced to death, and then he's being executed. And on all these three occasions, you're just equanimous. Nanda Marta. Yeah, Nanda Marta and Kajangala, they are my top favorites. But that is just my personal inspiration. I mean, Kajangala, because of this beautiful, harmonious exposition that is better than even what the Buddha said. And Nanda Marta, this ability to face death, which I also find something very important, my own death, the death of others, with complete equanimity, no trace of grief. Of course, there are others beautiful. So these two are, for me, the two that really resonate with me personally.
So I'd just like to read a small section in case people have the book on page 205 from Nanda Marta. At the end, it's just the way she says it too. Venerable Sir, this is not the only marvelous and amazing quality in me. There is indeed another marvelous and amazing quality in me. For as much as I wish, Venerable Sir, being secluded from sensual desires and secluded from unwholesome states, with application and sustaining, with joy and happiness born of seclusion, I dwell having attained the first absorption. With the stilling of application and sustaining, with inner confidence and unification of the mind, being without application and without sustaining, with joy and happiness born of concentration, I dwell having attained the second absorption. And then she goes on. And Sariputta says, and she goes all the way up to the fourth absorption, and Sariputta says, it is marvelous, Nanda Marta. It is amazing, Nanda Marta. And she says back, Venerable Sir, this is not the only marvelous and amazing quality in me. There is indeed another marvelous and amazing quality in me. Venerable Sir, of the 5 lower fetters that have been declared by the Blessed One, I see not a single one that has not been abandoned in me. Sariputta says, it is marvelous, Nanda Marta. It is amazing, Nanda Marta. With these final 2 qualities, Nanda Marta clarifies that she has mastery of the 4 absorptions and is a non-returner, making her indeed an outstanding lay meditator. These lofty achievements stand in the background of her superb balance of the mind when facing the killing of her only son or the sudden appearance of her dead husband. All of these are expressions of her highly accomplished mind as a result of dedicated meditation practice. In the light of her attainments, it becomes quite natural to picture her getting up in the early morning and reciting the chapter on the beyond, as reported in the introductory narration to the present discourse. Maybe you can tell that that story, because I didn't read it, about how she's overheard that a celestial king overhears her reading that, and then
she's reciting the Parayana. It is it's one of the most profoundest poetry collections that we have in Pali. There's a Sutta Nipata and the last two chapters, the Atthaka Vagga and the Parayana Vagga. And the Parayana Vagga is I mean, both are very, very profound poems. In fact, it's not easy, and they have sometimes been misunderstood or misinterpreted. But they're really all about Nibbana and the path to Nibbana and no attachment. And the Parayana Vagga is all these Brahmins, they just come and want to know from how to get out of here, how to go beyond. And he gives to each of them a teaching. So having memorized this collection is in itself marks Nanda Marta off as a very special person. And she could have memorized something from Dhammapada or so, but or some very nice and beautiful poems in there. But the Parayana Vagga is really, this is for somebody who has Nibbana right here in the heart and wants to hear that resonated in a recitation. And then the heavenly king flies by and he has to stop it. Whoa. And so he actually tells her, Sariputta and these monks, they're on the road. And they're going to arrive at this and this time. So give them a food offering. This is why these monks, I mean, at that time they didn't have iPhone and couldn't send out hey, we're coming here tomorrow morning. Can somebody give us food? The heavenly king to do these kind of things. And so they arrive, and she's already there. All food is ready and prepared for them. It's very, very beautiful. I wanted to add one thing about debate and miracles. Both things are not seen as values in themselves in early Buddhism. So, in fact, there's discourses where the Buddha forbids his monks or his monastics to perform miracles because they do not convince people. And in this, particularly in the Atthaka Vagga, he also is very reluctant about debate. He doesn't really go debating with others. In another passage he says, I don't debate with the world debates with me. And so the idea is simply that debating is not conducive to the search for truth. And I think we can confirm that even nowadays. We just go online and look at some of these Dharma, Buddhist idea blogs. It's not necessarily that truth or solidly understanding is the most prominent thing that we see, but wanting to be right. And doing the same as they did in ancient India, using arguments in order to win the debate. And the Buddha very clearly saw through that. But at the same time, when being challenged, he would, of course, not just refuse. And this is the same with Sona. There's a challenge out there. And so she just responds to that. And she combines both. She does a miracle by floating up and debating. Say, come on, ready for you. Yeah, I just wanted to add that on the Sona story.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Do you know whether there were nuns at the great centers of learning, such as Nalanda and Vikramashila?
I don't know.
Okay. I wondered if we could look briefly at Kujuttara on page 209, just because we just mentioned Nandamata memorizing this and reciting, and I found this section on page 209 also very inspiring, which I'll just read out briefly. The same already came up implicitly in the previous chapter in the description of Nandamata's early morning recitation, showing that she had memorized the chapter on the beyond. This description helps to clarify that to develop a good acquaintance with the teaching is not confined to book learning. For example, inspiring passages can be read out aloud, even if that involves just a translation, as a way of letting their oral nature come more alive and perhaps even be memorized. Recitation done from memory can in turn become part of one's meditation practice, as it can be skillfully employed when the mind is distracted in order to give it something to do and allow it to settle down. which can then become an entry door into the more silent dimensions of meditation. In fact, from a traditional perspective, the cultivation of mindfulness embraces all three types of activities that engender wisdom: hearing, learning, reflecting, and meditating. It can be quite helpful to step out of a rigid division between theory and practice sometimes found in Western thought, and instead adopt an open attitude that enables flexibility, adjusting to the requirements of the present moment. If the mind is distracted, perhaps some recitation or recollection of the teachings is adequate. Once the mind settles, however, this can be let go of in order to allow the deeper domains of meditative experience to unfold. Yeah, so I just like this because I found it so useful. If one's meditating and there's a storm, and even if I know some small stanzas, if I can just remember those or even recite them in my mind, how helpful that can be. And yeah, surprisingly helpful, especially if the mind is in quite a storm. So yes.
Yeah, I really recommend to make recitation a part of daily practice. I do that myself. For me, it's more when I come out, because I start very early in the morning. But by the time it's getting time for me to go and get my meal, before that I usually recite, and I have the edition in Devanagari published by VRI, so it's very beautiful. And I just recite through the suttas. Every day, just take one sutta. I've just finished the Citta Samyutta. And just reciting it in Pali, when the mind is still quiet from meditation, and allowing the sutta to just sink in, and then it comes with me for the rest of the day. Kind of gives an undercurrent of some ideas, something that Citta said, or something that came up from that sutta. And then also when I do my walking meditation, sometimes just phrases in Pali pop up. And this is just a very beautiful way of weaving the teachings into the actual practice. And of course, if we don't know Pali, we can use translations. I mean, there's fairly good translations particularly by Bhikkhu Bodhi, which I recommend over some of the things that are available freely on the internet. And these are, just read them out loudly, and then maybe something that really touches us, like it was just shared here, this Nahang Lokina Vivadami, Loko Chimaya Vivadati, these pregnant sayings. I don't debate with the world debates with me. Then to have these kind of like in our memory, stored in our memory, that's a mindfulness practice. It's a way of strengthening mindfulness for then when comes the time to be in silent meditation. Let me just drop these things. Then it's just quiet mind. But having this in between, either as a tool when a problem comes up, or simply as part of the transition. Maybe if you sit in the evening, coming back from work, and I don't know, you might have a family and children, I don't know what. Finding a transition, taking up, maybe having a Buddha image and lighting an incense or not, depending on what you like, but having this little bit of Dharma input, so that the mind kind of settles, quietens, gets this Dharma vibration. And then it feels by itself like, okay, that's enough now. And meditate. And make this is all literature. It wants to be heard. It doesn't want to be read.
Right. It wants to be heard. It doesn't want to be read.
Yeah. I think this is there is a different way of understanding. I mean, for me, I can only speak from my own experience. We are almost at the end now, so we can maybe close with that. When I started with the Satipatthana Sutta and doing my PhD on that in Sri Lanka, excuse me a moment. And my friend Damaruan, he's the one who, as a small child, remembered a past life and chanted all this Pali. And so I was talking to him and I said, oh yeah, the Satipatthana Sutta, I'm memorizing it now. I'm reciting it, but all these repetition parts, I just skip them because it's boring. No, Bhante, don't do that. Recite it fully. I said, Iti ajatam va ahidda va samudaya dhammano pasiva, always the same thing? Okay, if he says, I'll do it. Actually, because of giving full value to the full text, I had a major understanding that the key instructions is not the individual exercises, breathing, 4 postures, la la la. It's this internal, external, arising, passing away, etc. This is actually the key. This is why it comes up again and again. This is what in the oral setting anybody would have remembered, because you just hear it so many times. Iti ajattang va kaye kaya anupasivya dipahidda va kaye. This is really the key, actually, of the practice. Mindfulness internally and externally, rising and passing away, and just mindfulness and not clinging to anything. Not clinging to anything. Anisito chaviharati na chukinchiloki bodhiyati. Dwelling independently without clinging to anything. And what the book Daughters of the Buddha is really meant to be is to inspire all my sisters, aunties, whatever, to dwell like that, not to let the misogyny and discrimination that sometimes is there, let us rob us of the inspiration of the Dhamma, that beautiful path taught by the Lord Buddha, the practice. Anisito chaviharati, to dwell independently, truly independently. Not clinging to anything at all. I think with that we have come to the end of this session, and I want to thank Marta for the questions and Priyas for the organization, and all of you for listening to me, giving me an opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bhante. And yeah, on behalf of Pariyatti, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this event. And a very special thank you to Venerable Bhikkhu Anālayo and Marta Van Patten for joining us. So when you leave this meeting, you will be presented with an opportunity to fill out a post-event survey, and the link to the same survey has been posted in the Zoom chat box. So if you have a few moments, we really would appreciate your feedback. Okay, thank you, everyone.